So we're back.
That's
As always good to see you guys. It's Black Shirt Day today. It's official. So, can you guys? Okay, we'll go back. We'll cut that out. We'll cut that out.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're not cutting it out.
I'm just kidding.
Leave it in. Leave it all in. But can you recap where we left off last time?
I can't remember. I think. Oh, it was the nuclear weapons, right?
Yeah, I remember he was talking about how his opinion had shifted on, because he was ultimately in charge of the Minuteman missiles being launched. He was kind of like the last guy to actually put in the codes in it to shoot, and he was more than willing to do it when he was in the military at that age. But since then, his views have shifted markedly, and now he's very anti-nuclear warhead. Calls for like total disarmament across the world.
Right, absolutely. And I do have to applaud you on your outstanding interview skills, man. You're such a good listener, and you're able to engineer these brilliant, insightful questions. And I do recall, Josh, that you did have off-camera questions for him. Do you remember what you guys talked about?
Yeah, I think I remember it. I think it had something to do with his state of mind at the time.
Yeah.
He was in charge of U.S. Air Force missile silo. And so I want to know how willing he was to launch those missiles, as opposed to how he felt about it now.
Yeah. And that leads us to where we are now. And so we'll see where we go from here.
Did you see he changed the way he was looking at you?
Yeah, he's looking at me and disappointed in my solo chair. I'm failing at my job. I'm sorry, Mr. Salas.
Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start this up.
I started researching the entire subject of UFOs. I talked to Stanton Friedman. He convinced me that two of those documents were authentic. And one of those documents was the Eisenhower briefing. The Eisenhower briefing given to General Eisenhower when he took office as president included this document that showed the names of the Majestic 12 people. And then, of course, there was the scientist from Canada, Smith, forget his name. But he was working with the U.S. government. He had been invited to work with the U.S. government on gravimetrics, what he called gravimetrics, which was the current theory of how these UFOs operated in our airspace through minute control with our gravity field. And he said in writing to his superiors that the Majestic 12 group was studying UFOs. So that's pretty good evidence, I think, that this group existed, as early as 48, and then continued on, and must have continued on. It's only logical that this is a real phenomenon, that it continued on to the present day.
And so you're saying that the implications of those documents being real, meaning it started with those 12 and grew from there into what it is now, this
Yes.
vault that you're referring to.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way to identify who and what companies and people are a part of this?
Oh, that's a good question. Because there was a recent memo. Let's see. Help me with the names. Navy Admiral, who was part of NSA, I think.
The one on technologies, the strange technologies and science, where it's explaining like meta.
No, I'm trying to think of the names. The one was, yeah, you know it too.
It's right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember it. But yeah.
Anyway, can't remember
Yeah,
the
he was
name.
head of NSA if you're looking it up
Okay,
now.
He was a deputy
Admiral Wilson.
Admiral Wilson, the Wilson memo, right? and who was the other guy?
Davis.
Davis. Yeah, yeah. Davis was. Let's see. He's a scientist, and he was able to talk to Admiral Wilson. Because Admiral Wilson was trying to find out which civilian companies had contracts as a result of this recovery of craft and trying to back engineer that technology.
And at this time, Wilson was head of all black projects, wasn't he? Like he had to sign off for the money to go to each one.
That's right.
That right?
That's right.
And
these are called SAPs, or what is SAPs? Special access programs. So Wilson, Admiral Wilson, wanted to find out the details of who these companies were that were working on these special access programs. And he got stonewalled. They wouldn't talk to him. And finally, Wilson's boss, I guess, head of NSA, told him to back off and not follow up on this. However, now we have the regulations in the National Defense Authorization Act where the Comptroller General of the United States can legally investigate which civilian companies have contracts with the government. They're required by law to do that, actually. And they can start digging into which this includes secret contracts. Mm-hmm. And so they can officially do that legally and delve into what kind of programs are these? How is the money being spent? Et cetera, and get into those details. So there is a way to do that if the Congress has the will to do it.
which goes back to rallying people and pushing the congressman.
Exactly, yeah.
I see where you're going with it now. That's a little bit more optimism than I had about 15 minutes ago with this. I did not know that. So
two key points that was brought up. We talked about the Wilson memo and the Majestic 12. Could you guys summarize a little bit about what those are and why it's a meaningful and important piece of evidence for the phenomenon?
Well, before that, the Eisenhower brief.
And the Eisenhower brief.
A lot of people
right.
don't know about the Eisenhower brief.
Yeah, can you break that down in simpler, common language?
Basically, the Eisenhower brief is this theory, not theory, but there's information out there from credible people that President Eisenhower was whisked away from the White House to meet with representatives from another planet or even a dimension or another parallel universe, aliens or extraterrestrials.
So essentially, the president was read into the greater reality,
Yes.
is what this briefing was.
Yes. And so in this meeting, he spoke to two different types of civilizations, and in this meeting he made a deal with one of them. So apparently he was given the choice to humanity being given the choice to advance spiritually but not technologically, or advance technologically but not spiritually. And of course, being the time of the Cold War was getting started, and the security state apparatus and the military industrial complex getting a foothold on America, they went with the technological part. Pretty much made a deal with the devil, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
And wasn't there like a tacit agreement amongst the entities that Eisenhower dealt with, where in return for the technology, they were allowed to abduct X amount of people in the United States, like unimpeded in some sort of way.
That's some of the information that came out, that they were allowed to abduct a certain amount of people, but I think they went over the limit.
Do we know how this information became public? Was there documentation that surfaced?
I don't know. I don't know if we know. I know from someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's certain personnel that behind the scenes are worked in official capacity that can testify to this. But the documentation that we do have is the existence of Majestic 12.
Yeah. So
Can you guys describe what the Majestic 12 is?
I'll give you a chance if you want.
Yeah, I have a very cursory understanding of it, but I think it was X amount of like generals, heads of some of the companies that we're talking about, and some people higher up in the government that formed this little group that was supposed to like oversee everything that we're talking about. They disseminated everything down that was going to happen.
And in a way that people can understand, better visualize it, because humans are learn from experience. But basically, the X-Files, if you watch the X-Files, the group of men in the shadows, led by the cigarette man, who are controlling the world, preparing humanity for an alien invasion. I think that's the plot of the X-Files.
Got it.
I don't know what.
But these are people that are like generals and scientists and such, and they're essentially the program managers for this agreement that the president was read in on. And later, Admiral Wilson out of Point Loma, I believe, right, San Diego, caught wind of it, and because he was overseeing all the intelligence programs, believed that he had the authority to get read in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially he was rejected. And it was Dr. Eric Davis, a physicist, who... Did he bring the notes out to the public through the FOIA Act or something rather, or I forget how, but there's actual documentation, right? So that's the most important thing, that there's documentation about the Majestic 12 and documentation about Admiral Wilson that's all supporting the idea of what President Eisenhower and his briefing, that this cabal exists, for lack of a word.
Just to make something clear, I approach things from a skeptical.
Yes.
So when I first heard about the Eisenhower brief, and I thought it was bullshit, and kind of the same thing with the Wilson documents and Majestic 12. I thought it was complete BS.
Do you think it was BS on behalf of misinformation from the government?
I thought it was misinformation or just people making shit up.
Oh, okay.
But apparently it's a real thing now. These are real people in charge of these special programs.
Do you recall the turning point for you that persuaded you that there's some credibility?
The person that told me that the Eisenhower briefing said that the same thing about the Wilson document and Majestic 12.
Yeah. And that's all you need to say. I understand the sensitivity of disclosing that person's identity, but that's all you have to say, because I recognize that. But how about yourself, Jeff?
Kind of the same boat, where I view everything through a skeptical lens, and thought the same thing. And honestly, it wasn't until you vouched for it that I started to take it seriously, despite like Stephen Greer and those people talking about it ad nauseum. He's intimately involved with all of that stuff, but it just seemed too outlandish to me to lend any credence to until Josh.
Did we ask him about the Reagan brief? Because I was told the Reagan brief was real too.
Let's go into that. I don't think I'm familiar with the Reagan brief.
So basically, the Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States, was writing on it too, and his brief. I don't think he met with any extraterrestrials, but he was told that there was a threat from a group of extraterrestrials. And so that was like the only difference from the Eisenhower brief, that he wasn't able to meet with aliens, but also that Eisenhower wasn't briefed on a group of aliens that were supposed to be a threat to Earth. But I was told that the Reagan brief was also real, I wasn't told if the information that he was giving was real, but I was told that the brief was real. So
Right, it actually happened.
So yeah. So I mean, because the brief can be real, but maybe he was given the wrong information.
Right.
Right. But I kind of like infer that because I was told that the brief was real, that maybe the information there's a good chance that the information was real, the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easy from the outside, people who are into ufology that are living their everyday lives to hear this and kind of dismiss it because it does sound so spectacular.
Yeah.
But when I actually try to put some intellectual effort into it, I try to figure out what's the cost benefit for these people of critical positions. I mean, Robert Salas is retired, at best. He's getting he didn't charge us for this interview.
Yeah.
He spent quite a bit of time. So it's costing them quite a bit.
It was Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Saturday or Sunday,
Yeah. The game was on.
The game
He
was
wanted
on.
to watch
He
the
wanted to watch the
game.
game, yes.
And so I can't wrap my brain around the game for this long con. Like, why would government officials... I understand psyops against foreign countries, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I can't formulate in my mind any kind of motive that they would have to create this kind of hoax from within the government and have these documents and have these feuding sections of the government. All I can think of right now is that there's definitely something happening.
I do think, and I've come to this conclusion in the past month, that there is a bigger secret than just aliens that the government has been actively hiding with disinformation. A way bigger secret than just aliens. So, like, if the extraterrestrial thing came about, they'd be happy with people knowing about it. But I think that the other secret is the one that even the people that I've spoken with in the know kind of have gotten nervous about talking about it.
Well,
Yeah.
Circling back to what you said earlier, the magnitude, let's work from the premise that the Eisenhower briefing was real and he was offered a choice between technology and spirituality.
Yes.
Why spirituality? That opens up a whole lot of questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
That seems significant that that's their best offer. Why would this advanced civilization give us either material technology or spirituality?
No, they just offer spirituality. And it was two contesting civilizations. And one offered spirituality, and the other one offered advanced technology. So they were different.
Still, one of them thought it was of value to us.
Yes.
Is that because, we could speculate all day long, but going back to opening the door to more significant things, right now we're kind of thinking nuts and bolts UFOs and other species, possibly intergalactic or whatever it is, but then wrapping our brain around the idea of spirituality, does that then open us up to...
Well, I tend to, and you guys will kind of like verify this about me, but I tend to store data points, and if somebody tells me something, I'll just put in. I don't know anything about it, I'll put it in the back of my head to retrieve later on. And I go back to Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar, this gentleman that claimed he worked in S4, right? He worked on crash retrieval programs, reverse engineering. And he got to walk around in restricted areas, and in one of the areas, he got given this encyclopedia-like phone book to read, because he got read on. And one section, I believe, spoke about humans being containers. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So, soul containers.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's my data point that I tend to attach to the Eisenhower brief with respect to the spiritual beings.
Right. And I do have a bias about that remark, and it tracks, it's consistent, and I could be looking at it through a biased perspective. But in my research and work that I've done in parapsychology, the science of our brains and our consciousness as a product of physical neuronal activity, it's our best guess at the moment where we're correlating brain activity with consciousness. But we all know that correlation doesn't equal causation. But there's the Department of Perceptual Studies, University of Virginia, and various other academic institutions that have found case studies, particularly during heart surgeries where people have died on the table, and are able to describe things in the room during the time period where they're supposed to be dead, medically dead. And it seems to make more sense, or we could actually start applying some scientific method to it if we shift our paradigm from consciousness as a result of brain activity to our brain being receivers of consciousness. And in that regards, it makes sense that we are a container for the consciousness. So it starts to make some rational sense in that regard.
And the only thing I would add would be that there are many types of consciousness. So even if we didn't receive anything, we still be able to have a certain amount of consciousness. It just wouldn't be the same as like you being a EMT, right? I forget what the name. I should know this, being a corpsman, but remember like assessing levels of consciousness.
Yeah, altered levels of consciousness, LOC.
Yeah. So there's still consciousness in there. You're not just not receiving. You're not aware of your world, the world around you, but you can still assess the level of consciousness.
Yes.
A thermostat has a level of consciousness, right? It reacts to the world around it, and then when the temperature in the room turns to a certain reaches a certain level, it reacts to a thermostat.
Right.
And this is from Michio Kaku, reading one of his books, and it made complete sense. Having said that, from on a personal note, my mom had an experience like that. So she suffered from, she had some really weird brain stuff. I can go into it, but this is not time for it. But she had a stroke and a heart attack, and in Philadelphia, and so she was in the city walking downtown, and when she suffered a stroke and a heart attack, like both at the same time, like she should have killed her. The ambulance came, picked her up, and she remembers like them picking up her body, putting in the gurney, putting in the ambulance. She was like, "What's going on?" And then the ambulance taking off, and her chasing the ambulance to the hospital.
Oh wow!
Then she remembers the paramedics or the EMTs, whatever, hitting the button to open up the doors, and she was looking, and so as the doors were closing, she was like, "I need to get in there," so she rushed in to follow as the doors were closing in behind in front of her. So she says it was completely an out of body experience. Like she saw everything in the ER, how they were working on her, and but it wasn't her first one. She's had several ones as a young woman too. So just a personal experience.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And I believe that the conversation with Mr. Salas will eventually take us there as we serendipitously discover a bit more about Mrs. Salas.
Yeah.
I think it'll circle us back to this conversation. While he's looking for the other video, Jeff, did you have some feedback as well?
No, not too much to add on that. I would just think that, if the choice was spirituality or technology on that, could it also be that the technology will only get us so far? Does it require a certain level of spirituality?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Sorry.
Does it require a certain amount of spirituality in order to advance beyond a certain point? Can we reach a level 1, 2, 3 type civilization without that knowledge on it? Or are we just... are we going to blow ourselves up or whatever it is?
Well, the evidence shows that these highly technological beings have lost a certain amount of either never developed or lost a certain amount of free will, imagination, creativity. They're very grounded and don't advance after a certain level, right? That's what we spoke about, the Malachian, right? Consciousness. So it's very grounded, and it has a limit. You're said that you're not moving beyond that. As a matter of fact, you deteriorate. So go ahead.
So when we say the word spirituality, are we saying ethics, or are we talking parapsychology capabilities?
But yeah, parapsychology.
Yeah, so a little bit more in the...
Not ethics, yeah.
Yeah, so we're not necessarily talking about... Because I think when people think of spirituality, they just think about being a good person, and things of that nature. But it seems that what we're talking about has more to do with non-local sensory information, possibly PK, things of that nature, more, for lack of better words, psychic capabilities, or psi, PSI.
Yeah.
Is that what you think they were offering us, is unlocking our potential
Yeah,
in that regard?
Possibly. That's kind of what I was thinking with it. And I also, and obviously I don't know this for a fact, but it seems that what I've read and what I understand is that a lot of these craft and things are being controlled via consciousness in some sort of way. Like they're plugged into it. So yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about on it.
Yeah, no, they, yeah, no, they were definitely offering us the ability to unlock our the abilities that would have been stunted
Right.
or blocked
Yeah.
that we have naturally.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think that's what they were definitely offering.
It's like the true potential
Yeah,
of what we
yeah,
can be.
Yeah, and it doesn't have anything to do with flying craft. It has more to do with the ability with like interacting with the world around us without technology.
Yeah.
So if I'm using my brain to fly a craft, that's still technology.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to like vibrate with the universe and then appear somewhere else, like teleport to another part of the universe, regardless how far it is, that's consciousness. That's true consciousness.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And previously, we were at the MUFON area. We got our meeting. We got to speak with the Hyneks, and
Yes.
it seems several people are trying to reverse engineer any kind of anti-gravitics, and it's pure speculation. But because nuts and bolts tend to interface with our five senses, because that's the observable universe, right, where we're trying to interact with what we can sense.
Yes.
But if we unlock those capabilities and that aperture opens up, could that be the missing piece where we're more in tune with whatever, if they call it dark energy or quantum entanglement or things like that, where we have more willful control over those phenomenons if we expand to be able to have those out-of-body experiences at will?
Yes.
Does that allow us to interface and develop technology around that?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the development of humanity. So we're going to have to go through a technological stage where it's mostly technology, then technology and spirituality, then just spirituality by itself. So we have to go through those. Yeah.
And now walking it back, because we're approaching it through potential, right, and like positive things, but we started the conversation based on the idea that this information is being suppressed because of fear and because they don't want it to get out because chaos can ensue.
Or people just want to hold on to power.
Or,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
very few individuals.
Yeah, I think that's mostly it. I think that the excuse of like, well, society will fall apart. Well, let it fucking fall apart. Let it fail.
Yeah. Do
Let it
justice
fail.
and let the sky
Yes,
fall, right?
Let it
Yeah.
fail. Because you're holding on to structure of power and structure of that have been built on a lie. Seriously.
Yeah.
And so that have victimized people,
Right.
that have killed and maybe tortured, raped, stolen, right? And I'm not being this huge, how do I say, like, I'm not politicizing it. It's the truth, right?
Well, I mean, politics
Yes.
is founded on resource security,
Yes, yes.
right? Where we're controlling our borders so we can control our food security, we can control our shelter to protect us from attack. What motivates people to attack another aside
Yeah.
from sociopathic reasons, right? When things are scarce or the whole economy, right? When we're fighting over gold or oil is for financial security because that's how we trade for
Yeah.
necessary resources.
Yeah, but when the government comes in and kills a bunch of kids that are living in the church with either with black with them in Philadelphia or in Texas with the Branch Davidians, like burn them alive. They threw a bomb in Philadelphia. I was a little kid when I saw that. Right? They go with the helicopter and threw a bomb in there. Right? That's I'm not really like we're thinking the government is there to protect us, but they're bombing their own people. They're poisoning. They know that a lot of the food that we ingest is poisoning us and degrading us. Right? They know that a lot of the stuff they're feeding us on TV is degrading our abilities for critical thinking. Right? This is all planned out. You can read it in the books. I'm not making it up out of the
I get it.
thin air. Right?
Yeah.
So then I'm not worried too much about like when they talk about like, oh, yeah, I am a close border guy either. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
At the moment, yeah, because you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But you also have to realize that if if they're hiding something that's going to change humanity for the better, but they're making up this other excuse, right? And the excuse is that society is going to fall apart.
Right.
But at the end of this other thing that might be a hard road, it's I don't want to say nirvana, but because I don't want to romanticize it either. But it's a better world for humans, right?
Right.
Then let this fall apart and let this better world come out of that. I'm all for that.
I could see the counter argument right away that what would destroy the current hierarchies more than endowing all of its citizens with the ability to do is what we were just talking about. You have forced scarcity, you have secrets, you have all of these other things. And if I'm able to access information in a non-local way at will, that can no longer stand.
Yes, sir.
Right? Like I can prove definitively that you're full of shit.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
And I would imagine the people that are in power don't want that.
And all of this speaks to the idea that it's much harder to imagine a reason why they would be lying and creating this hoax of aliens and Eisenhower briefings. And it's much easier to think about why they would keep it secret. There's so much motive to keep it secret.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a huge motive.
Right. And so it's...
No. And again, the part where people talk about keeping humanity stable, right? It's complete bunkers, right? Because you can see them destabilizing the world all over the place, right? And then they on the one side they're like a lot of the stuff we see in Europe were like mass migrations, and there's like, oh my God, how is this happening, right? It's because it's the instability they cost.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm not talking about the Europeans, the everyday Europeans who like work and struggle, right? I'm talking about the people that run the world.
Right.
So yeah.
For sure.
And this conversation, when we look at, because a lot of people are trying to think of, come on, is this real? Is this really real? Right? The best we can do is look at plausibility, right? What's the likelihood of that? And we just think through this problem. We have at least 2 documents that exist to support the accusation that there is suppression of information, that there's an organization that exists. And looking at means and motive, it's far easier to go down the path of trying to think through that problem and come up with reasons why you want to keep it suppressed. It's far more difficult to figure out why, what benefit they get out of making all of this up.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe we'll get deeper into.
After skiing, you went and worked with the FAA. Is that right?
No, I went to work for Martin Marietta in Denver, and then again, they were doing proposals on the space shuttle. Actually, what they call the manipulator arm, the arm that comes out of the bay. And then I went to work for Rockwell International in LA area. Again, as a reliability engineer working on space shuttle proposals. And that's after that, for about a year, I went to work for FAA as a structural engineer, looking at aircraft structures, approving any modifications that would come along to either existing aircraft or new aircraft.
Okay. And how long were you there, you said?
About 22 years for FAA.
Oh, so quite a while. Did you ever encounter any more anomalous experiences or hear about them from people while you were there? I always heard that the FAA stonewalled any sort of pilot from reporting this.
Yeah, I think the FAA has, of course, radar data. I know that for a fact. It was presented by, can't remember his name now, but he was in charge of one of the ARTC, Air Route Traffic Control Centers, which tracked these anomalous objects from time to time. And he actually had radar data and produced it to the public in 2001. But I wasn't involved in that aspect of the FAA. I was strictly engineering structures of aircraft. Yeah.
Okay. Going a slightly different direction, but still within the same thing. It seems that the more people I talk to that have had experiences, once they have one, it's almost like the clouds part and they start having more experiences with UAP and anomalous activity. Have you had anything happen since that initial incident in 1967?
Yeah, it's in, and I write about this in my second book. In 1985, again, this was before I went public. I had an incident in my home. I had a wife and 2 children, my current wife. And one night I woke up for no reason and saw blue light coming out of my living room. Didn't have any blue light in my living room, so I woke my wife up and said, I'm going to get up and look into this. And I said, do you see the blue light? She said, yeah. I was about to get up, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. And I turned to my wife for help, and she was unconscious now. So next thing I know, I worked like hell to try to get my mobility back. I mean, I was really struggling. And so I know it wasn't a dream because I remember it clearly. Then a little while later, this person or being appeared in the doorway to my bedroom, had a hood on, face was dark, and I couldn't make out a face, or I don't remember the face.
You know about how tall? Any further description on it?
No, it seemed about average height, but it had the hood. I remember the hood. Then I was aware of small beings in the room. So they seemed to me like children. But again, I don't remember what they looked like at this point. What I'm telling you is a result of about 4 sessions I've had in regression therapy, hypnotic therapy. Anyway, next thing I know, I'm being lifted off the bed, floating, headed towards the window of our bedroom. It took me right through the window. That sounds ridiculous, but that's what happened. No broken glass, just right through the window. Next thing I know, I'm aboard a craft, lying on a metal bed, and being shown, actually I'm being shown this needle being held by long, very long fingers. And they place it right in front of my eyes, and
Horizontally.
horizontally, not
Okay.
pointed this way. Horizontally, about like this. And it was long. I mean, it was long. And they said and telepathically, they said they were going to insert it in my groin area, but it wouldn't hurt. And when they started to do that, it hurt like hell. It was extremely painful. The worst pain I've ever felt, and that, again, is another reason this was not a dream, because I remember that pain. Telepathically, again, I told them this was very painful. And as soon as I said that, the pain dissipated. It just went away. Yeah. I think they took semen. I can't prove it, but I think that's what they did. And
So it doesn't matter how advanced we are, medical malpractice still exists.
Absolutely.
Someone forgot
Absolutely.
to put the painkiller in there. Man.
Yes.
But this is a case of human trafficking. I mean, people take abductions lightly and don't realize that this is kidnapping against their will. Right?
Human.
And you know, we're familiar with things like Havana syndrome, where they're using some kind of microwave radiation in Cuba to target U.S. agents and government officials and such. Is it that much of a stretch of imagination to be able to hack into the frequencies of the brain to suppress these memories? Because he didn't have these memories. He was memory wiped and all that, right? And it wasn't until hypnotic regression that he was able to recollect a lot of these experiences. And in my discussions with Eric Bard, principal scientist of Skinwalker Ranch, the way he describes it, his best speculation, he says it's almost like they hack into your limbic system and alter your perception of things. How much of a reality this is. All we know is that there's statistical data, that there's consistency of telepathic communication, of a loss of memory. There's certain patterns and such that happens. And so
that Havana syndrome technology is from the 1950s. Like
how far much more advanced
that's
that is
not
now.
anything new.
Yeah.
And I was in Brazil with a friend of mine from the military, and we were reading about it, and he was telling me and I was telling him, because he said, how are they doing this? And I said, bro, the technology is so compact now, they can put it in a suitcase, it's handheld. He's like, no. He's like, that can't be, because the stuff I've seen is huge. It's on a truck, it's on a Humvee. I was like, no. That's so they're called psychotronic weapons. Psychotronic weapons. There was a doctor, you can look this up, his name is Jose Gatto, and he in the 50s and 60s he worked for the government developing this stuff. And they recruited him, if I'm correct, they recruited him because he showed an experiment where he put probes in a bowl like with horns in his brain, and then he had a remote control, and basically the ball would charge at this matador, and then he would he would press a button and it would stop.
Kind of like a Neuralink thing.
Spin around in circles and run away in a different direction. And from there, he disappeared. And someone, because I saw an interview about him, and a scientist that knew him ran into him and asked him about his experiments. He's like, I can't talk about it, but the stuff that I was working 10, 15 years ago, and this was like the 70s. It's like, it's nothing compared to what I can do now to people.
I might be misremembering this, but I remember talking with you about this a couple years ago and then looking it up, and I seem to remember that they actually had like video footage of the bull.
Yeah, that's video footage.
And it showed exactly what you're talking about, spinning around, stopping, doing all sorts of things like that. And in the video I saw, it alluded to the fact that, yeah, that's how he started, but ultimately they were getting to the point of being able to create like the Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, but it was like a section of MK Ultra.
Yep.
But that's so in the Manchurian Candidate stuff, it's more dissociation, psychological dissociation. So you torture somebody long enough, they're going to dissociate, and they're going to create multiple personalities. So personal dissociation, and then you start like giving them like training and stuff, and but it's a little bit different than psychotronic weapons. Psychotronic weapons is so he was in the side of the house for psychotronic weapons, like beaming voices into people's heads. I think the technology now is where they have this nanogel that they inject into people's brains, and then you can control somebody with the nanomachines that are embedded in your brain. So the thing with Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Yeah,
that's like that's silly,
right?
Because the stuff they have now, you don't need leads going into a brain.
Yeah.
You can do it remote control.
And bringing psychotronic technology to popular culture, people don't realize it's become very popular with binaural beats. You know, it's become, many people don't really understand its history and origin.
Yes.
A lot of people think, people are now listening to white noise and brown noise to induce specific brainwave patterns, but binaural beats, I believe, was engineered at the Monroe Institute with the Hemisync program by the CIA to get the hemispheres to synchronize in such a way that you start to experience some for lack of a better word, psychological phenomenon that some people call psychic experiences, right? And so now, you could go to YouTube and look up binaural beats, and bringing that further, there's now audio-visual entrainment. Essentially, binaural beats, I believe, is having a pulse that skip a certain cadence, and your brain fills in the gap between the beats.
Yes.
And that's what causes the synchronization of the two hemispheres. So that way you start, I believe, Jeff, can you explain that? You do a great job really breaking
now
down.
that you tee me up, I'm going to fuck it up. But Yeah, essentially your brain finds the stasis between two different frequencies. So if you had 100 frequencies going in your left and 104 in the right, your brain's going to find the difference at 4 hertz. And we know that certain frequencies in the brain correlate with like alpha waves, beta, gamma, theta, things like that. And so, for instance, like a theta wave is like a deeply relaxed state where the body's asleep but the mind is very active. And we know that that's right around like 5 hertz, 4 to 5, something in there. So you can artificially bring yourself into that state with binaural beats on it, or any other ones, gamma, whatever you want.
The only difference binaural beats and psychotronic weapons, because binaural beats are not psychotronic weapons, is that you are using I forgot, it's like I don't know if it's terahertz or I forgot which, but basically you're beaming a signal right through the cranium straight into the nervous system, and you're hijacking the nervous system from a distance. So you don't need headphones, you don't need that sort of. So
but I think it sounds like the fundamental, so expanding from binaural beats, and I'm going to lead it up to the psychotronic weapons. We have guys like Dr. Jeff Tarrant, Psychic Mind Science, who's studying brains like Laura Lynn Jackson. I hope that's the correct last name. My brain's fried right now. But he's reverse engineering their brain patterns by studying the brainwave patterns, and he sees like maybe right hemisphere gamma in the visual cortex, delta, looking at these different patterns, and he's using these these technologies to reproduce these brainwaves in exogenous ways, whether it's sound frequencies like binaural beats and also visual frequencies. And now they even have certain things that you lay under and it could induce a psychedelic experience based on the frequencies of the light emissions. So scaling that up, understanding how the brain works when certain mediums or psychics are receiving information and processing things, it's correlated with the brain imaging, where the brain starts accelerating to gamma state in specific regions of the brain. If you can start mapping that and then start really engineering how you can induce that, not just from light frequencies and sound frequencies, but now hypersonic frequencies. I think that's how it's not that much of a leap to go to what you're talking about.
Okay, I mean, they're using it to like, they hit a frequency, they cause heart failure, kidney failure, like some kind of organ failure. So they're not just, because the nervous system is it's a system, right? So you're not just attacking the brain and that's it. You hit a certain frequency and you're causing somebody a heart attack or an aneurysm. So I know what you're telling us links it to this.
Yeah, so it's not that impossible for abductees to experience some things and really look at the actual technology that exists today. Right? And we're kind of in our infancy. If we're talking about advanced civilizations, how much further have they taken the technology? Or was that part of the Eisenhower deal? Right?
Maybe, it could be. I don't know. I don't know if that was part of the Eisenhower deal. What we got as far as technology. But,
because we got to be trained up in how to use it, right? Maybe like I remember something about Bob Lazar talking about how they had some craft and they try to reverse engineer, they hit a wall, technology would catch up, unlock some understanding, they go back and work on it again, make progress, right? Maybe they didn't teach it, they gave us some stuff and said figure it out.
Bob Lazar also said that some of the stuff that they found was like pretty old. So it wasn't like stuff that they handed to us. We also found stuff that was like really, really old and like almost like relics, but super advanced. So that leads to other civilizations that might have been around Earth that somebody doesn't want us to know about.
Because there's religious documentation and archaeological documentation going back thousands of years. So to us, like HD TVs are like a new thing.
Yes.
Right? But when we talk about psychotronic weapons, they're using this on a routine basis. You know, it's not that.
It's not a leap of faith to think that some other civilization can't have some kind of some analog to what we have now, or even more advanced than what we have now, and utilizing it to kind of like Men in Black. Looking to the light.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's from what I understand, is the way they authenticate people's reports, because a lot of what people say, right, like gray aliens, they look like this, mantis looks like this, so a lot of people could just take information from popular culture and regurgitate that and prop themselves up to feel important or special because me too kind of thing, like I also got abducted.
I'm feeling attacked.
But there's apparently a group that finds specific nuance in certain testimonies that's not in popular culture, where this is consistently reported across the board, these small details that's not in the mainstream popular culture that may authenticate that. And it's hard to explain. How do these unrelated
I've
people...
been there. I've been in that situation
Yeah.
where I told someone, and without saying like, hey, me too.
Yeah.
I was in a situation when I explained what happened to me after a year of knowing this person, and came forward and told him, hey, this is what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he's like, well, the way you're explaining it, you wouldn't have known any other way other than if you had really experienced it.
Yes,
Right,
yes. Yeah, and I bring that up to reassure the audience that there is a scientific method being applied to the survey of all these because it's difficult to authenticate anecdotes, right? Yeah. Anecdotes and testimonies are kind of a weak form of evidence.
There are certain things I was led to believe there are certain things in popular culture that are in the full picture, right? So there are things that happen to experiencers that don't reach popular culture.
Yes.
It's very small details that aren't widely known, and so that's exactly. I think that's what you're trying to allude, right?
Yeah. Yeah, is that he goes and he himself, he's an engineer. He talked about his career paths. He's an analytical guy, and he admits that it sounds crazy, but that's what he got out of his hypnotic regression.
Yeah.
That's what came out. And whether it's malicious or not, once he expressed pain, they took away the pain. It just sounds like someone messed up.
Yeah.
And kind of a teaser, we talked with Paul Smith, and they may be non-human, but they share some human characteristics in that regard. Right? When in our interview with Paul Smith, you had a great relationship with him. Operational remote viewer from Fort Meade Army, Operation Grill Flame. He's an OG.
OG, yes.
And he shares a similar story of what is relatable about this experience, and we'll get to that on another podcast.
Yep.
But ultimately, my takeaway with that is like they're not infallible.
No, they're not infallible. Absolutely.
They make mistakes.
They told him, right, that it wasn't going to hurt.
And then it hurt.
And it hurting like
Who got reprimanded for that?
Yeah, right. That happened to me when I was a corpsman.
Plus, I mean, how important is it to look at the fact that they took the pain away from him at that point? We can say like, okay, well, maybe they're benevolent because they're doing this or whatever their intentions are. But at the end of the day, they still broke into his house, paralyzed his wife, and took him against his will.
Right.
And so there's that aspect of it that he did not give his consent in any way, shape, or form that we're aware of.
Yeah, but taking away the pain doesn't make them benevolent. It just helps him become more compliant.
Yes, and that may be why they showed him the needle first and told him what they're going to do, so he's less combative, perhaps.
I just think what Josh said is a big distinction from what I hear in like the common narrative on those types of things, where look how good they are because they did this, and you're overlooking, the elephant in the room, which is again the complete lack of consent.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Funny anecdote. Because you're talking about showing them the needle, right? Mm-hmm. You're thinking that makes people more compliant, but right? Is that what you were?
That they were prefacing what they're about to do and reassuring that, look, we're going to do this, we're going to put this in your nuts, and it's not going to hurt.
Well, okay. So I used to, when I was in the Navy, being a medic, I used to do ear lavages, right? And you're using a catheter, a needle catheter attached to a syringe, put water, and you used to squirt the water in, and it would like kick out the sand and whatever else gunk was in there, right? But I used to do that when I used to take because the needle came with the catheter, right? Yeah. And I would used to separate it and show the needle, so people would think I was going to stick the needle in their ear, and they would freak the fuck out. But I was pretty evil at the time, so. And then it turned out I was like, no, I'm going to put the catheter in here and do that, but. I don't know if what they were trying to do was like to come up.
Misdirection, like kind of what.
Or maybe they're just fucking with them.
Yeah, who knows?
They're
They
just
didn't even
laughing.
use that needle.
Maybe they
Yeah,
were.
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they were just messing with them.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they were lying when they said that it wasn't going to hurt.
Right, they just were trolling.
Yeah,
Who
maybe
knows?
they were trolling him. Seriously, yeah.
Hey, this isn't gonna hurt.
Yeah,
Bam.
this isn't going to hurt, and then all of a sudden it hurts like
Yeah.
hell.
All right, that's enough. Go ahead and give them the painkiller.
After that, they set me up on the table, and then they set me on a bench, and it was kind of molded into the side of the craft. They had two beings, two sentries, small again, at either side of me, and later they took me up again and floating. All this was floating. We were always floating. I wasn't walking. Along a curved hallway, bright light at the end, poof, I'm back in my bed. And the next morning, I didn't remember any of this. My wife didn't remember any of this. About 27 years later, we were in Ireland, listening to experiencer talk about her abduction experience, and she mentioned a blue light in her room. I turned to my wife and I said, "Bingo, do you remember a blue light in our bedroom a long time ago?" And she said, "Yeah, I do." At that point, I went and got hypnotherapy. I had 4 sessions, and that's how I recovered the memories I just mentioned.
You say you got up, and initially you were able to move, but then subsequently
No, I never got up off the bed.
never got up. But
I
you were
tried to.
trying to talk to your wife, and she responded in the beginning and then went unconscious.
That's
from
right.
There.
Yeah.
Was she taken as well? And did you
I
know? Yeah.
don't know, but it's very possible because her memory is slightly different from mine.
How so?
What she remembered was seeing the blue light and then pulling the covers over her head and trying to, she was frightened. And also she remembers different location of the doorway, and so it could have been in another house. Anyway, my daughter also has been very frightened of that house, very, very frightened. And my son also has told me, oh, well, we actually found our son whimpering in the hallway. At one point, he told us about that from that house. He was very young. He was only about 7 years old. My daughter was about maybe 11 or 12 at the time.
If you don't mind, I mean, obviously it's too personal. We don't have to go there. You found your son whimpering in the hallway. What had happened to him to leave him to be in that state?
We didn't know. We never found out.
Okay.
Except that we remember him sleeping in the hallway, and for no reason.
And also you had said that your wife remembers the doorway in a different position and it might have been a different house. Is it possible that this happened more than once?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I did in Manhattan Beach was I remodeled homes. I bought into Manhattan Beach and then started remodeling homes and selling them. I was trying to get closer to the beach. Got pretty close. But so there were multiple homes involved when we lived in that area. Yeah.
And do you remember any of those other experiences?
No.
No.
I do have, I kept a journal of strange dreams that I've had, and some of those dreams might indicate that I've had other experiences, but I couldn't give you any details.
Just for my own edification on this, what does it sound like when they're talking to you telepathically? Are you hearing it like your own voice in your head, or is it like markedly different? Do you remember that?
I don't remember. It's probably just
Or is it something you just
like
know?
my own voice in my head speaking to me, but from somewhere else.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please.
Your account is almost identical to my mother's account of
Oh.
except including the hooded person.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't go through a solid door, but they came in through the whatever it was came in through the walls.
Mm-hmm. Where's my wife? I had the same experience.
Oh, okay. And my mother has never been into any sci-fi stuff or anything. We're Mexican. I was born in Mexico. This happened in Mexico before I was born.
Yeah.
And she didn't start telling me this until I got involved with the subject. Have you heard this? People say, "Oh, your story sounds incredibly similar to something happened to me or a family member." Besides myself, anybody else? Have you heard other people?
Well, I've heard other stories about the hooded guys. Yeah. I've seen write-ups.
Going back to authenticating testimonies with certain nuances, the hooded figure doesn't seem to be a popular culture reference. You always hear about the big eyes and the grays and reptilians, but here we are in his house, and it starts resonating with you. And you didn't really get deep into the subject. Was it 2017, 2016?
Yeah, it was 20. I got really deep into it. End of 2017, 2018. Yep. And once I started working with this crew, I realized it was real, and I'll just say it out there because it's not a secret. But Lou said, "Hey, talk to your parents and see if anything else has happened." Lou Lozando. And
Yeah.
so he was like, "You should talk because this is generational. Abductions happen in generations. So because I have had stuff happen to me, so I went and asked my mom if she had any strange instances."
And just for the audience, you were the personal security officer for Luis Elizondo during the show
yeah.
of Unidentified.
Yeah, I was security for Lou, but I was hired by the History Channel. Yeah,
History Channel,
yeah, the History
owned by A&E
A&E,
at the time.
Yeah, so I was like, owned by A&E. Yeah, and for whatever reason, they felt like he needed security.
And just to frame it for the audience, this coincides with the release of the New York Times article
Yep.
provided by Chris Mellon and Leslie Keene.
Yes.
During that time, he wanted to push this into the public light by featuring these interviews on the show of Unidentified 2 seasons, and you were there for all of that.
Yep.
And so through his guidance, he mentioned to you, speak to your family.
Yes, I got to know Lou as well as you can know somebody when you travel with them around the world, South America and Mexico, and I got to know him fairly well, and we spoke a lot. And I told him about certain things that happened to me. This was after like the first year of me knowing him. I didn't want to sound like opportunistic or anything of that sort. So after I felt like I trusted him.
Yeah.
I told him, and he said, "You should talk to parents because this is a generational thing."
And that's what led your mom to share that information with you?
Yeah, I called up my mom and I asked her if she had any weird stuff happen to her when she was younger or when she married my dad. And she said she did, and I recollect other things. Like, it wasn't in a vacuum. It wasn't like I didn't know strange things that happened to her. It was like I hadn't put it all together. And so she said that she had this. She knew they weren't dreams. When they started happening when she got married to my dad, and she said that people would come through the walls at night, and she would try to wake up my dad, but my dad was not responsive. She would break up, and then just like it happened to Robert, she would levitate off the bed, and they would take her away somewhere.
Was this in Mexico City?
Yeah. And that was. It wasn't always like that. She said that also, besides levitating, they would also come through the walls, and the hooded guy would do this and like come over here. And she said she remembers her. It was a big hand with a claw at the end.
So he was beckoning to your mother.
To come. Yeah, it was a hand with a claw, and I said, "What did this guy look like?" And she said it looked like a crocodile, like a reptile. But she said crocodile. He had skin like a crocodile and like sharp teeth. And I asked him, he was like, he had a snout or anything. He's like, no, it looked like a human. It was just like scaly all over, and it looked like a. Yeah.
For context, do you know about what year this happened?
My parents got married, I think 1973.
73.
72 or 73, and they lived in Mexico City, but they also, so I have to ask her again because they lived in Los Angeles for a little while before I was born. I was born in 1974. So I don't know if it might have happened in Los Angeles, to be honest with you.
But before the 80s.
Before the 80s, yes. So it might have happened in Philadelphia or Los Angeles or Mexico City, one of those three cities.
And are those descriptors popular in Mexico City?
No.
Because this is far before the show V,
Yeah.
right? Like some people might say, "Oh yeah, I remember. I watched that TV show,
Yeah,
Eat Mice," kind of thing.
yeah.
But that was way before then.
So my mom suffered from migraines when I was young, and so she went to the this was the 80s. She went to the doctor to get checked for migraines, and they found a tumor in her brain. But the tumor looked like, you know, this bean sprout. It looked like a bean sprout that was curled up in the middle of her head, like right in the center between the two hemispheres. And it looked like a bean, and it had a tail, and the tail curled out, like almost like the Fibonacci sequence. And the reason why they found it is because they did X-rays, and she had the X-rays, but I don't know what happened to those. And I saw this, right? And they just like, oh, they found a tumor in her head. And after those X-rays, she went back, and it was gone. The tumor was gone.
But there's medical records, there's X-rays, there's documents.
There
of the whole
were
thing.
somewhere, but
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't think anything of it.
We're just blessed that it's gone.
Blessed that it's gone. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the case with my mother. Yeah.
And it sounds like it was recurring.
It was occurring. My mom said that she couldn't go to bed at night. After she married my dad, she was scared to go to bed. And it's kind of like, I'm not scared to go to bed, but I just don't like to go to bed. So you guys know what time I go to bed every night. Every night for years.
I get your 4 a.m. text,
Yeah.
3 a.m. text.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go.
Oh no, I was gonna. In a similar vein, why do you think that this is generational? Like there could be so many reasons for it, but what stands out to you guys as being the reason that this is passed down? Like why would Lou have brought that up to you?
I mean, because he knew, because through maybe recorded anecdotes and case studies from thousands of people, they figure out that this is generational, and the only reason why we think it would be generational is just the same way I don't know what do you call them, zoologists? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, goes to the Serengeti
Tracks animals.
and tracks animals and tags them, and then follows in their litter, and then records their behavior through several generations. And I think that there's something similar happened to us.
This isn't fully fleshed out at this point, but that seems to stand in contrast to me with the idea that we're containers, or that this is a container. Like, what's the need to continually check in on container machine, whatever it is that you want to call it on this? Why the constant need to come back and check
Well,
it?
because the container is highly advanced. It's a container that's computer, that's an antenna that can communicate with through time and space, right? And also like it records information that sends that it transmits it through what's it called, congenitally, right, to their offspring, right? And there's epigenetics,
Yes.
right? So there's it's not just a jar, an empty jar. It's a highly advanced
That's machine.
Yes.
Yes.
So and you have to like, if you gotta take care of it, like you would take care of anything.
And to that point, I kind of have my speculation. In as a personal defense trainer, I've always tried to figure out why certain people thrive in violence and some people don't, right? And what really fascinates me is that there's a propensity of people who have genetic predisposition to violence, where their anxiety isn't as high, or they have sharpened enhanced senses, that sometimes they have a history of violence in their family. Maybe their grandfather served in the war or something rather, right? So there's kind of an adaptation that's encoded in the DNA, and the DNA seems to take those lessons and pass it on to the offspring and evolve it even further if that person's lifetime chooses to pursue that path, kind of deal. And so if they're looking for a certain type of avatar, this human body, and seeing if that machine is learning through that lifetime experiencing in the next iteration, the offspring, if it's psychic capabilities or whatever it is that might be making that person compound into a certain aptitude that they're looking for whatever reason. And this is hearsay that I've heard, that humans are special in some degree with
points,
so this data point is that psi is a natural phenomenon, but apparently these other species are limited by space, not necessarily time, but space. And that's why a lot of times the abductions have to be proximal for them to communicate telepathically. But the word on the street is that we're not limited by space-time. Our operational remote viewers can look back in time. Future is a lot more tricky because of the way that free will can disperse the possibilities and timelines and such. But we can access information that's not bound by space-time. We can even, in stage 4 of remote viewing, you find a human at the target, you can interrogate the target and extract information from that person. Some people might consider that mediumship or whatever. But for whatever reason, we have access to be able to extrapolate information from whatever data points that these things are stored on. So one speculation is that that could be part of the hybridization program, where they don't have that capability, but for whatever reason, humans do. And maybe there's something in a genetic bloodline that has had that potential and is evolving with each generation. Maybe they're checking in on it and seeing where they're at. And what happens then if you reach to the level of evolution that they're looking for? Like, what happens then? This is all speculation, all pseudoscience.
Speculate in logical way, right? So you're just not throwing ideas and like throwing shit at the wall and seeing what catches. You're using data points to
trying to make sense
perhaps,
about nonsensical things, right?
Yes.
Things that don't fit our paradigm.
No, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I can't argue with what you're saying.
How about yourself? Did you have any like ideas or imaginative things
With what?
with the whole topic about why they might be interested in checking in? If it's just the receiver of consciousness, what makes the avatar important?
Not really much more than what you guys just said in my mind. Like piggybacking off of Josh, I was thinking of it how we track animals in the wild and stuff like that. But I would also think if we brought one or two into captivity, we'd have a pretty good idea of how they work. So there must be something more to it than just how we work. It must be tracking it over time.
I don't think humans are that
Complex?
No, that simple. I think there's a lot of things that on the surface about humans look very simple, but in reality are super complex, right? So it's not complicated, it's complex. So the more people dig into how DNA works, the more they see like it's a fractal and it's an antenna and it works in multiple dimensions, and it collects it can generate electricity, it can generate a sort of laser, right? It gives off a photon that's coherent, right? And it just like goes on, and it just kind of like the more you dig into it, the more you find out about it. So I don't think that we kind of like view some of these beings, and I don't think that the beings that are abducting us are that smart, right? We give them a lot of credit because they have, like I said, they have a great amount of technology, but they've reached a level their spirituality dropped off, and with that, you lose your ability for imagination, creativity, right? And so and those two things actually correlate with intelligence and the ability to reach tap into what people would call the Akashic records or whatever, right? They're able to. They're not able to do that. So I think that as far as we're concerned, we're an enigma because we have, and I know we've argued about this, but I think there's a level of free will that we have that they don't have. I'm not saying complete free will, but I'm saying there's a level of free will that they do not possess. And so I think this is from my intuition and also from what I've heard from people is that they're trying to figure out how to tap into that. And they haven't been able to, and I don't think they're ever going to be able, right? I just think it's kind of like what we're talking about where we look at the human DNA and we're looking at it, and it seems like somewhere in the past somebody already understood CRISPR and CRISPR the crap out of us, but they didn't really engineer us. They just burnt stuff because they weren't able to, for whatever reason, they weren't able to like figure out how to like restructure our DNA in order for them to have like what when they needed us to be, right? So they found this being that had a certain type of body, and they tried to mess with it, and it didn't work. So the best they could do was like cut out the abilities through burning DNA. That's what I've figured out from listening to different people, like scientists and people who are in the know. So sorry.
No need to apologize. That's amazing information and a great way to think about it. When we look at AI and we created this thing and then it starts developing its own language and we have to check in on it and shut that down because we don't understand what they're speaking and kind of redirect it towards a direction that we can manage.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah. I don't think that the beings that burned us were our creators. They were like they were more like opportunistic beings that just showed up and found us in a certain state or vulnerable state where they remember the video you sent this morning.
Yeah
They found us in a certain vulnerable state and they messed with us and kind of took away certain abilities that we had, or not completely taken away, because I still don't think that they understood what they were doing.
Right.
So the best they could do was just kind of close them off for the time being. Yeah.
And for the audience, there's a video that discusses quite a bit of how religion overlaps, a lot of historical context overlaps with what we're experiencing today. It's difficult to talk about the subject without talking about consciousness, without talking about history, without talking about religion, because then it starts to really make more sense when we actually have that confluence.
Yeah, but maybe it's a subject better approached on a different
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah. Let's do it.
That,
Are these people from the government?
No. This is books I've read. Like I said, we know Yvonne Smith very well. She's written about 3 books about experiencers. She focuses on experiencers, people who've had these experiences.
I'm sorry. And you said your wife had a similar experience?
Yeah, you ought to put her here in this chair and interview her.
I said the same thing before we started.
Well,
Come on over.
which one?
You're on.
I'm sorry? What's your
Sure. Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
Are you finished with me?
I had a couple more questions for you. Is that possible? Just ask those, and then we'll switch.
How do you want it to flow?
Yeah, I can finish with him, and then I would love to hear from your wife as well on this. I only have a couple more. I'm not trying to keep you all day. I apologize.
All right.
So I had mentioned this before too, but I guess I'm going to kind of double down on it now with this. They didn't hurt you in any sort of like long-term way that you're aware of, but they certainly took you without your consent. Do you think that these beings are, again, benevolent? Do they have any sort of like bias one way or the other? Or do you have a bias one way or the other on how you view them?
As far as whether the beings are benevolent, are not that, well, there are two things I can look at. One is the nuclear issue. I think they're benevolent in that way. They're trying to save us from ourselves, or trying to, help us recognize that we've got in our hands the ability to destroy every living thing on Earth. And these many, many issues, I've written down about 13 separate incidents involving UFOs and nuclear weapons in this last book. So they're definitely trying to warn us about self-destruction now. I think that's a benevolent act. What they did with me is part of a program where they're producing, I believe, hybrids for some reason. Yes, it's invasive, absolutely. Being taken with against your will is invasive. And of course, we got crimes on kidnapping about that, but they didn't try to harm me seriously. They're on their agenda of producing hybrids for some reason, which I don't know why. But they have some kind of an agenda for us, for humanity. However, I think they want humanity to evolve, to kind of meet them halfway before they fully come to us and say, yeah, we're here, we'd like to work with you or have you work with us, to be part of the intergalactic community of sentient living things.
Do you think that the cabal is complicit in these abductions and aware of them?
I think the cabal has their own agenda. If I were to guess, I would think the cabal looks at them as some sort of threat. Government agencies, intel agencies always look at the threat of the situation, and that's probably their attitude. But again, I'm just guessing. I don't have any inside knowledge.
It seems to me that there's a bit of an inherent contradiction there, in the sense that they're actively trying to stop us from having a nuclear war, but they allow this cabal to manufacture weapons that could potentially be much stronger. Why would you allow that if you're trying to disarm the others, and to have that much power in the hands of just a few?
Yeah.
Well, we're assuming that they're the same, right? That the ones that are stopping the missiles are the same, are the ones that are kidnapping people, and also I don't think it's an assumption. I just will disagree with him in that the Eisenhower briefing, right? They made a deal. Hey, you guys can abduct this many people, right? I don't think there's any way, meet you halfway, straight up abduct you, right? And they went over the deal. From what I've heard, they were only allowed to abduct a certain amount of people and do a certain amount of things with them. And they've gone into other stuff. Well, I say they, like this group, but you can't assume that it's only one group that's doing a lot of this stuff, right? And because you sent a video not too long ago about these spheres that are just people are seeing everywhere, and I think that the guy that gave an explanation about the spheres made some really good points, and I tend to agree with just about everything that he said all right. So that's a different group a different group with advanced technology than people doing the abductions.
Yeah, and in regards to abductions, there is one possibility that I have heard expressed that we haven't quite covered. What we do know is that memory is wiped. And through hypnotic regression, they're recalling certain aspects, but they don't recall all the abductions, they don't recall a whole lot. It is possible that we are also not recalling our consent, our agreement. I've heard some people say that they agreed to the program or something.
Maybe they're mean before they reincarnated. I've heard people say before I reincarnated, I agreed.
Like soul contracts or things of that nature.
Bullshit.
Right.
I don't agree with that. I'm just going to straight up say because the one person, there's one guy that's the the foremost authority, I think, has studied this more than anybody else. Dr. David Jacobs out of Temple University. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but he interviewed thousands of people, and did thousands of hypnotic regressions, recorded this, has he's identified patterns in the as far as stories and physical abductions and methods and types of beings, right? It has always been the same type of being throughout the grace.
Oh,
Yeah, right. With the abductions where they're not consensual, because there are instances where it is consensual and it's not a gray. It's a humanoid that's pretty hot, right? It's
No,
really
I
attractive.
dig it. I
yeah,
dig it.
the first one that happened in Brazil,
Right.
and the dude was chastised and they
Yeah.
made fun of, but it was a real thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's all to say that in all the thousands of interviews he did, never once was there any remembering of consent. As it was the complete opposite. People didn't want to be
Right.
deal with these abductions, right? And they would do just about everything. Like people didn't sleep. They would fight. They would do as much as they could to not be abducted, right? And so there were people who were abducted against their will, but they kind of went with it.
Because I mean, what can you do?
What can you do, right? Well, you could fight, right? There are instances where like some people harmed these beings, like straight up like sucker punched them, right? Because they were like, well, for instance, one instance in one of his books, I think it was the book The Thread, right? Where like dude went to get abduct somebody, but there was like more people in the house, and there was only one. Apparently, they're only able to do this neural link. They call it optic link, right? Where they look at you and they freeze you, right? And they were only able to do it to one or two people at a time. And so, in this abduction, more people showed up and caught this being trying to abduct this woman, and so they jumped it. they beat the fuck out of it.
Yeah,
Right? And then more beings had to come in and kind of like help them escape.
Yeah.
Right. And this is one of like a few cases where like people got physical with these things.
That I mean, it brought to mind Virginia,
Yes.
where the military officer tackled one. I don't know if that's a gray.
Nobody caught space aids in this case.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, no space aids.
No space aids. I think we have to like really dig into that case because there have been instances. Again, physical contact.
Yeah.
David Jacobs talks about multiple times physical contact with grays, with hybrids, and in no instance did anyone have the physical effects from Virginia, right? Where the military guy, his immune system was completely destroyed. I call it space aids, but yeah.
It fits.
Are we gonna?
Definitely does. Yeah, I'm sure we've talked about it in the past, but I hadn't really thought of it in the terms you just said, in which there's more than one race entity, whatever it is, at play here. And so we have a tendency to like put it all into like
Right.
one bucket
Right,
there and
right.
then assign everything to that, whereas there could be very competing motives at play here with these different ones. But I agree with you. I've never heard of anybody consenting. I don't see how you could consent.
Sorry. I keep doing this.
Oh, you're good. I don't see how you could consent ahead of time, even in like the soul contract kind of way, and then maintain that throughout your life. It's
Right.
it just doesn't work
Yeah.
in my mind.
And in every hypnotic regression, we always get the resistance. You know, you don't recall a point of, oh, and then I calmed down because I remembered I agreed to this.
Yeah.
There's only one person who's really adamant. It's Geraldine Orozco. She's the one that was 4 months pregnant, has medical records, and baby disappeared, sadly. And
But David Jacobs has like thousands of cases just like
Yeah.
that, right?
yeah,
Where like, fuck, man. I hate to say, I hate to be, hey, me too. But
right.
I think I told you guys about my aunt, right? Did I tell you guys about my aunt?
No, what's going on with your aunt?
So my paternal aunt, my dad's sister. She never had a kid, but she would say things like, "The devil comes at night and I get pregnant, and I feel pregnant, and I'm gonna go see the doctor. And the day she goes to see the doctor, she doesn't feel pregnant anymore. She's like, I'm not even gonna go because I'm not pregnant anymore, right? And I would have said in the past, because I've heard this from her when I was a little kid, and I was like, she's crazy.
Right.
And then I read David Jacobs' studies, and to the T, women would, in their cases, they would say the same thing that my aunt was saying, that they would feel pregnant. Something would come, some kind of demon would come at night, impregnate them, and they would feel pregnant. They would go through certain amount of pregnancy, and when they would feel like they would need to go to the doctor, the next day they wouldn't feel, they knew they weren't pregnant anymore, right? But then there was other evidence that supported that they were being abducted. It wasn't just their own, I don't want to say like imagination, but it wasn't only their own oral testimony.
Right. That immediately reminds me of, I mean, if you're not aware of ufology and things like that, you just try to make sense of it in some way, right? In the Philippines, we have what's called the aswang, and it's folklore about like pregnant women who there's a being that goes on the rooftop and inserts its needle and takes the baby out.
The baby, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Who knows? It just occurred to me now. I've known about the aswang all my life.
Right.
And when you say that, it just immediately clicked. Like you don't know how to process this.
So we hear these cases and we think it's folklore or like old wives' tales,
or superstitions,
urban legends, right? But then when we start looking at scientific evidence, then you start realizing, oh no, there's something to these things that I heard as a child from relatives, right? So a relative who I dismissed as being nuts,
right?
And so
and then you see Dr. Jacobs and all his case
Dr.
studies.
Jacobs,
You start to see the evidence.
Super legit guy. Wrote many books.
Yeah.
Highly respected. And you start seeing all that, and you start seeing the pattern with. I started seeing the pattern with my aunt. To the T, the things she said were mirrored in these other in hundreds of thousands, I think, of female cases.
And it goes back with, I think, testimonies, having distinguishing reports that is consistent with people completely unrelated. Like Geraldine Orozco does not know your aunt, and reports very similar things, and you can find those consistencies in there. Not that we're trying to connect dots that don't really exist, but it's standout data points.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So, got a few more.
Okay.
Before we go to Maryland, I believe.
Yeah, we're not going to Maryland.
Yeah.
So you've been into this field for a really long time. What interests you the most at this point? Like, what rabbit holes are you going down now? What really gets you going?
What gets me going is the extreme secrecy and around this whole subject, and the fact that I'm dedicated to getting disclosure in any way we can. I think I told you, or that I'm committed to disclosing everything I find out to the public. I don't hold anything. I don't have any secrets with the public. I think I just lost it.
Little thing.
Sound guy.
Thank you, Nick.
So you're committed to disclosure.
I'm committed to disclosure. I'm committed to disclosing everything I know or I find out. Like the critique I did of Arrow, I could have, let it pass by, but if I believe, and I do believe, they're slow walking this, and we're not going to get any real answers from them for a long, long time if we allow them to operate the way they're doing now. We've got to keep putting pressure. By we, I mean the public. The more the public puts pressure on Arrow and Congress to push Arrow and others to come forward. For example, the Air Force has not said a word about the incidents I've been speaking about for nearly 30 years, they have commented not one word, one way or the other. They've got an NDA I signed. I've broken the NDA. Basically, I thought I was at Echo Flight when I started speaking, so I didn't think I was breaking the NDA then. But in '96, I found out I was on Oscar Flight. That is still part of secrecy, which was covered in this NDA. Why hasn't the Air Force come after me? Why have I not been prosecuted?
Because that would acknowledge that it was real. Right.
Because they would have to acknowledge that it really happened. I would present my evidence, and I think I'd win because I've got overwhelming evidence. So this secrecy, this excessive, extreme secrecy is what really keeps motivating me.
I love it. Well, lastly, where can people find you? Books, find you on Instagram or you?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I have my own YouTube channel.
And what's the handle for that?
Bob Salas, or I think Giant Head 3 is another handle. I'm on Twitter. I've got my own website, spiralgalaxy.org.
Okay.
They can go on there and see some of the evidence I've presented, including some audio tape. So yeah, I'm out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are you guys able to translate what Echo Flight and Oscar Flight is?
I don't have a clue, and I was just thinking the exact
Yeah, it
same
wasn't the Air
Should have
Force.
asked him.
I think there were two different missile silos. That's what I get out of this, that they were different silos, and they're that's their code name, Echo Flight. And what was the other one?
Oscar?
Oscar Flight. Yeah.
Oscar. I was kind of thinking the same thing because remember he came out after the other guy did that was at the silo like 30 miles away or whatever. So maybe that's what it was, or maybe there are different types of NDAs, different levels to them. I don't know.
Yeah. With you being the one engaged in the conversation, Josh and I were managing sound and cameras and such. What were some of the things that impacted you most in your interpretation of your conversation with them?
I mean, for starters, just what a nice and courteous man he was, welcoming us into his home. You know, sitting for that long, like you could see he was definitely stoked to get off the camera there at the end, because between our interview and Laura's, he had sat there. Yeah, he wanted to watch the game. Like, he was pretty unambiguous about that with it. But how eloquent he was, how thoughtful he's been with this, not just in his own experience, but using that to branch out into like the paranormal world at large. Completely with it. He's dedicated his life for the past 30 years of doing this. I think secretly, especially with like the last question, I was hoping that he was going to drop this like truth bomb on me, that because of his experiences and the people that he's in contact with, that he would have some sort of like unimpeachable evidence that would kind of just be like earth shattering. And that's not the case. He's a regular dude, just like we are, searching for the truth. I would be interested, after listening to that there, to hear what he has to say after that bill went through and how gutted it was.
Right.
Because if what's driving him is this secrecy, well, that secrecy is still very much intact at this point.
We're going to get to see him soon, right, at the MUFON?
Yeah, MUFON's having their national thing, and he's a featured guest speaker.
Yeah.
So we need to.
But there was a moment, I mean, the video doesn't seem that long, but there's some times where we ran out of batteries and I had to go on a battery run.
Yeah.
And so you guys got to have some conversations off camera.
There were definitely, what the things he said were setting confidence.
Okay.
Because because he was really honest, right? Remember some of the stuff he said was like the most honest I've seen anyone that we visited.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to betray his confidence.
Of course.
He was very critical of some people.
Yeah.
He was. And I also feel like that brief interlude that we had, and it came in between Laura's interview and ours, was integral in us getting the quality of the interview that we had. because before, I mean, I had never spoken with Robert Salas before that, and it afforded me like 30 to 40 minutes to be able to sit there and get to know the guy better. And I feel like that showed, like, you could see his whole countenance shift from before that into after, and he seemed like much more comfortable. And not that he wasn't affable ahead of time, but just a little bit more so afterwards. There was a comfort that we were able to achieve on that. How about you?
A lot. It's a lot to process. You know, I thought you did an amazing job. You always do with your listening skills are through the roof, and your recall and being able to really interpret what you just heard and ask critical questions. You know, it really gets people to break script, you know, because they're used to routine questions and it's just another interview. I have the same answer. Not that they're deliberately trying to rehearse, but people tend to ask the same questions. And I believe we got some information that isn't readily available because of your ability to interview and find insight in some of the information that you get from the person you're talking to. So thank you for doing a phenomenal job. And I'm going to watch all our podcasts because I'm learning something new every time. It's like reading the same book over and over again. Yeah. But Josh, yourself?
Well, I mean, it was our first interview, correct?
Yeah.
This was the first person we interviewed. So I'm going to be honest, I didn't know much about him other than the stuff I researched online that was written. I didn't read the book or anything of that sort. And so I expected somebody who was who was maybe a little bit colder and more detached because of the level of fame he achieved in the UFO community. You've seen, maybe I should keep this. Anyway,
certain personalities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no, he was, like you say, he was a very warm, welcoming person. I was very impressed by how how do I say this? When you were gone, how candid he was.
Yeah.
I don't, right? So it's somebody I really want to get to know in the future.
Yeah.
More. Yeah.
Aside from the videos that we captured, our experience of the totality of things, I think, doesn't come across in the videos or podcasts. No. But that was my first time in Ojai. Not familiar with the place, but going to the house, first things I start seeing is statues of angels and spiritual icons and such. And getting to know Mrs. Salas, it seems like it's no coincidence that the two of them would come together.
Yes.
You know, she presented us and showed us a few things. Will we do an episode?
Yeah, we're going to do one in the future. Okay. Yeah. Our next person is going to be, in contrast to Robert Salas, is going to be Jaime Maussan.
Perfect. Yeah.
So we'll be doing Jaime.
Just to preface the eventual Marilyn Salas, she's very kind-hearted, just as Mr. Salas was. You know, he came out. We were a bit early and a bit unexpected. Gave him some time, and but she had a certain presence about herself that was very palpable. The entire house was the energy there was palpable. It's difficult to describe, and we're dudes. We're not into essential oils or anything like that. But when she brought out
Speak for yourself, though.
Is that why you're always glistening? And she brought out her essential oil and sprayed it for us, and it was, for lack of better words, magical. You know, I've never been into that stuff. That was my introduction to crystals and oils and the impact it has, at least on the psyche. Right?
Yeah.
There's some things that were transformative about hers specifically, and also the history behind how she developed them.
No, I sleep with my crystal every night under my pillow. She gave us a quartz crystal, right?
Yeah.
That's not cheap, I don't think.
Yeah.
But more important than the monetary value is what I get at night when I sleep with it. I get some amazing dreams.
And I think that's the plot twist that we can present, is that there's more to it than the nuts and bolts and biologicals. There's that spiritual side of things, and it seems no coincidence that they're both under one household there. You know?
Yeah, because going off of what you said, the moment you're in front of her, you sense that there's something different here. And then getting to hear her whole life story and stuff, it didn't surprise me at all that she ultimately told us that she's been a healer for 30 plus years.
Yes.
And I can say, just like you, I've never been into crystals or anything like that, but I literally had a notepad out taking notes on the things that she was recommending to do, and I do them to this day.
Yeah.
To everything from the crystal to using the Himalayan sea salt for different things, all of it, because you're like, she's the real deal.
Right. There's
Whatever it
notable
is.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he's got like the analytical side
Yes.
really on lock, and she is very deep into the feeling and is an experiencer of her own
Yes.
multiple times over.
Yeah.
We'll go deeper into that
Yeah.
on her episode, but I'm looking forward to that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good one. So
Definitely the one with Jaime Maussan is going to be pretty interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back Mexico City.
Yeah, we're going to go back to Mexico City. Yep.
And just to tease the audience
Yeah.
about some of the things that we did with Jaime Maussan.
So we got to hang out with them for a day. We went down there unannounced, right?
That was-
So we just were like, hey, we're gonna go see Jaime Maussan. Got on the plane, went to Mexico City because he was gonna be at our symposium, right? A UFO symposium. We show up unannounced and, hey, you gotta give us an interview, man. And he was like super gracious.
you kind of understand. Like, he was getting in his car.
Oh, we'll talk about it next.
Okay,
Next time.
gotcha.
Come on, dude. You gotta,
It's a great origin story, man.
yeah.
It's a
So
freaking
it's
fantastic
We'll
story.
get into it more depth, but we got to hang out with him. He was like, he's super cool dude, really really cool dude, and really gracious, and we got to hang out with him. And she showed us some of the materials that he has.
Yeah.
Some pretty cool stuff.
For the audience that doesn't know who Jaime Maussan is, can you?
He's I think he's like the foremost investigator in around the world. I don't know anybody other than maybe what's his name,
George Knapp?
George Knapp.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like neck and neck.
So he started out as a news broadcast journalist and
yes.
discovered the phenomenon, and then has since then committed the past several decades
Yeah.
to the research.
Yep.
And
Yeah, he was a reporter for 60 Minutes.
Yes.
Mexico. I mean, he's the real deal.
He was the
across
real
the board.
deal,
yeah.
yeah. I remember as a little kid in Mexico, he had a TV show on I forgot what channel it was, but anyways, it was called Another World's Watching Us, and I remember watching that show in the 80s and thinking, that's, even as a little kid I was like, that's fantasy. Yeah, come on, man. Yeah.
And then here you are, as an adult,
I'm like,
knocking on his
knocking on
window.
the window.
You gotta give us an
Hey,
interview.
come on. Next time.
All right, next one. Well, don't want to give too much information. It's a good teaser, and look forward to doing it again. We'll do Jaime Maussan.
Okay.
Right on.
Cool. Anything else to add?
No.
I think we're good. Thank you guys. You guys are amazing, and we'll see everybody else next time around.
See
Right
you
on.
next time, brother.